Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to yet another exciting session of the Masterclass series brought to you by NESCOM's Center of Excellence for Data Science and Artificial Intelligence. My name is Madhav Bissa, and I'm your host for today's session. I welcome you all and hope everyone is getting used to the new normal. So before we start the session, I request all the participants to keep their microphones on mute and switch off their videos. Thank you. So now on to today's topic. Enterprises are increasingly looking at data science to create sustained competitive advantage. This includes the ability to not just respond, but to anticipate and prescribe, to balance innovation with frugality and outcomes with cost. It has become a strategic imperative to build empowered teams which will create leverage for the organizations to succeed. To understand how to build these teams and develop them over a period of time, we have with us today Mr. Debel Chakraborty, who will share his perspectives and experience with us. Debel is currently the Global Head of Analytics and Data Science at British American Tobacco. He has rich experience of more than 22 years spanning across FMCG, telecom, shipping, and IT and energy industries, with more than 15 years of experience in data science field alone. He has successfully delivered business solutions with consolidated business impacts exceeding 500 million US dollars. He has also built and managed multi-site large analytics and BI teams from grounds up. Debel is currently located in Malaysia. So Debel, thank you for joining us today for this session. And to take things further, we have Mr. Snehanshu Mitra, our head for data science and artificial intelligence. So without further ado, let me open up the stage for you. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Snehanshu Mitra and Mr. Debel Chakraborty.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks, Madhav. And Debel, very warm welcome to the Masterclass series. This is an effort of the Center of Excellence, Data Science and AI to bring incredible voices such as yourself for the benefit of the data science community. And to the audience, we had asked you to send across questions that you would like us to ask to Debel. Very happy to suggest that there have been over 100 questions that have been sent over to us. And at the very outset, let me thank you. Thank you so much for the engagement. Thank you so much for the interest. And we have picked up about 10 questions that we believe are kind of representative of the topic itself. Debel, we've had a very strong response, to this webinar. We received over 400 registrations, and we are hoping that a good percentage of those registrations will turn into attendees. But welcome once again. We'll go over those 10 questions, and time permitting, we'll open it up to the audience as well, right? And we'll also push you to sort of get your perspective on which is the one question that you like the most.
Sure. Thank you, Snehanshu. Thank you, Madhav. Pretty excited to be on the stage here and looking forward to sharing whatever little I have learned in my career so far.
That's being very modest. I'm sure there's tons that you can share with attendees today. But I'll sort of cut across to 4 or 5 sections along which we have sort of bifurcated or grouped those questions. I will start off the questions now. And one of the things that came our way was this whole term citizen data scientist that was introduced by Gartner, as you would know, a couple of years back. And for the benefit of everybody, citizen data scientist is a person who creates or generates models that use, diagnostic analytics or predictive or prescriptive analytics. But very importantly, use primary job and job function, that is, it lies outside the field of statistics and analytics, right? They do not replace the experts, but they play a complementary role, right? So that is there's a setting. An interesting question is coming up, which is around how to define, how to set up, how to govern citizen, data scientists in organizations. They will your view.
Yeah, good question. As with any area which is heavily dependent and enabled by technology, so is data science, which is rapidly evolving. in most organizations, data science has become that shiny toy which everybody wants to have their hands on. And without doubt, it is promising the world. So while it requires a bit of caution, but the good part is a lot of people across the organization are now very interested in dabbling in that area, doing data science themselves. And I think with that growing trend, we saw Gartner coming out with coining that term. Uh, Something which actually adds on to that phenomena is the growing trend of self-service analytics, right? So organization more and more are trying to enable, empower the last person in the organization across the board so that they can find out and create their own insights, uh, take decisions which are more data backed rather than just by gut or experience. And I think towards that area, the concept of citizen data scientist is evolving at a very, very rapid pace. When we look at a concept of citizen data scientist and hence self-service analytics, there are quite a few things which needs to happen or be ready as a prerequisite. For example, you would want to have your data accessible in a centralized location. Not just that, it to be governed well, so with great definitions, with a good catalog so that people are aware, a good semantic layer where the KPIs are predefined so that people don't create their own versions of truth. And with all of this, you also need a front end or a consumption layer, typical visualization tools. And I think the growing trend within these tools is also to make them less complicated, less specialist and more generalist so that people can, a general person in the organization without a hardcore backing in data science can pick it up and drive it. So I think with these evolving trends, we will see more and more of the generic reporting, generic insight generation being passed on from central specialized data science team to the people at the ground level. We are at the start of that journey. Not many organizations have reached there. Quite a few organizations are trying that, are trying their hands at it. But I think very soon it will be an inevitability that most of the operational insights will be generated from the front.
Lovely. So a couple of things that I'm sure the audience would like to understand better. When we're talking about citizen data scientists, they will, are these external people trying to help out an organization, or are they also employees outside the core data science teams that are trying to get started on this whole trade, whole domain?
Right. So by the very definition of this term, they are not core data scientists. They are hobby data scientists, in other words. What it effectively means is it would be a person either in operations or in sales or finance who has a full-time day job. And as the trend of using data to take decisions is an increasingly growing chorus, they want to reduce their dependency for that one report or for that one KPI on a central team, which obviously takes a bit of time, has a process to follow, and want to do it themselves. And that is what is driving towards this entire phenomena. So in short, it's not a qualified data scientist who's called as a citizen data scientist. It is the person who is learning, trying his or her hands on data science elements, sometimes succeeding, sometimes failing, but who earn their livelihood through a core job other than data science.
But at the same time, very empowering, isn't it? We've always thought about how do we create this extended talent pool, because more and more business functions are today making use of data science very actively, and that probably is a little bit of a stepping stone. Would you see it that way? Would you also agree to the fact that becoming citizen data scientists at least is giving them some sort of a career path that we have so much struggled to sort of create 10 years back as far as data science roles are concerned?
Yes, And if I have to reflect back on a few of the people who are now attending this webinar, maybe they wouldn't have seen that in their generation, but in the in the late 1990s or the early 2000 millennia, we saw that shift on computers in general, right? Computers was not anymore something that the IT team or some specialized guys would use, but it would be something that everybody would use for their general job, to an extent today that actually people who do not also who are not employed are also using a computer. So in a very similar way, I think the pressure of using data uh, is coming from everywhere, from the top, from the competition, from the peers, and in pure sense, it's not today a good to have. It's something which can make you successful and is an imperative. And if you do not have that skill set, you probably will be not so efficient as you should be.
And this also
Madhav, I think we've lost.
I guess.
yeah, sorry. Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Lovely. So they will again. This whole momentum is leading towards some sort of a data science democracy. Leading from what you just suggested, that this is helping the whole moment of creating a larger data science organization, right? But I will quickly move on to the second question that is coming to us, and this is to do with the whole concept of centers of excellence. Am I audible to everybody?
Yep.
Oh, lovely. So the whole point around creation of centers of excellence now.
Madhav, I think we lost.
Yes, I guess there's a problem with the internet today there, where he stays. So, not a problem. So, you back, Snehanshu?
Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Fine.
Okay, lovely. So I think please bear with me, the electricity connection, the internet connection are both a little suspect, but as long as the questions are audible and Debel is visible as well, I think we can still have a productive session. So I was just going back to this whole point around centers of excellence. There are multiple ways in which data science teams can be set up. We have seen functional models, we've seen centralized models, we've seen embedded models where analytics units are embedded within business units. And then you also have centers of excellence that are kind of considered to be hybrid models in some ways. And we have a few questions that are coming on centers of excellence. The questions are around how do you sort of set up centers of excellence for success, and how can analytics COEs go beyond the limitations of the analytics maturity of larger organizations? So these are the two questions that are coming up. I request you to take them up and answer in any order.
Sure. Ideally, to this spectrum of structure, how an organization should be structured, there are two ends. One is an absolute centralized model, whereby the control, the prioritization, the budget, the coordination, everything lies with a central team, and they deliver analytics output to the entire organization. To the other extreme, which is a very federated or dispersed kind of a model where there's no central team, and the entire control, the budgets, and all of those elements reside with the business teams or functional teams or regional teams, whichever way the broader organization is organized as. Now, in between, we have two kinds of model, and they are generally the most preferred kind of model. One model is your consulting kind of an organization, in which the resources are managed centrally. The team is all central in nature, but the budgets and the request comes from the different functions. This works very well for an organization which has differing levels of maturity, where the use of data science and the data science skill set within the functional areas is still not up to the mark or is developing, as well as where the organization is trying to set up the culture, the roots of data science across all practices. On the other hand, we have the COE model, which just is a coordinating arm with some specialist in the center, and we have the actual delivery unit sitting across functions and the different regions. Now, typically this would work well where the regions that is using the COE model would be fairly mature, both in the use as well as creation of data science. And hence, I think every organization would need to take a call on what model fits best for its requirement. But if I have to look at it, there are 3-4 elements which I think we need to assess before deciding that model. It would be the maturity and, more importantly, the standardization of maturity across the organization. Secondly, how much the leadership, the central leadership, wants to be in control versus federated out. Thirdly, how much buy-in does the organization have in the world of analytics, right? Having said that, once we form a COE, to make it successful, we'll have to ensure that the COE is the hotbed of skills. What I mean by hotbed of skills, while the functions and the region would be an expert in their respective areas, there should be nobody else who is most knowledgeable about the subject of data science than the COE. Only then will they get the respect, will they be conferred upon or asked questions on. The second is, as a COE, since the delivery arms reside with the end business, they would need to have extremely good relationship and understanding of the business if they are supposed to consult with them, right? And both of these elements do not come on day one. They come with a bit of time, and which is why, as I said earlier, the buy-in from the central leadership as well as the regional and the functional leadership is extremely important. I would say that these are the two basic mantras which I use if I have to set up a COE organization: credibility with the stakeholders and the best talent in the world of data science in the COE.
Super. So I was just alluding to one of the things that I thought was the essence of the question as well, which is to try and say that how do I go beyond the limitations of the larger organization, and can I be ahead relatively? If so, what are the things that I should be doing as a COE?
So what I meant by you should be the hotbed of skill is you should be the SME. So which means you as a COE would know the subject of data science better than anybody else in the organization. You're the expert, right? And if you are the expert, the essence of it is that the users of data science will listen to you, right? And and I will probably repeat what I said earlier. The mantra for that remains these two elements. As I have built organizations in the past, in the initial phase, there will be questions, there will be credibility gaps, there will be a consistent ask of whether do you require the money, what outputs can I see, when can I see, how do I validate it, and it continues till the time you have delivered a few use cases, till the time you have delivered a few success stories. Once you start delivering the success story, the trend starts changing dramatically. And I have seen this happen with my current organization as well as in my previous organization. The moment people smell blood in the classical sense, they see that this organization can bring value for them. then you are the hunted lot. Then you figure out how to make time for everybody. And that, in my mind, is the nirvana state for a COE.
So, and then once you've set it up, the whole idea is to get into the efficiency parameters, and the whole hypothesis is that as practices emerge, we look to add more efficiency to the processes, to the workflows, and then precisely where something like lean ways of working starts coming in, right? To minimize the time through the loop of learn, build, and measure. One of the questions coming in, Debel, is what should be the size and capability of a lean data science team, and what kind of skill sets are required in the team?
Size is a very interesting question, and in one of my previous managers has said, whenever you are not very clear on the answer, you start off by saying that's a great question or an interesting question. What I mean by that is size depends typically on what industry you are in, right? If I have to take an example of some of the most technologically advanced companies like Amazon or Google, obviously their size will be very different from some consumer durables company, right? Or some engineering company or heavy engineering company. And hence, there's no fixed measure to the size. But if you do have to apply a rule of thumb, it should typically, a core data science team should be about 0.5% of the overall company population. Yes, there will be other elements of what are you delivering, how much are you delivering, are you into operational data science or are you into strategic data science, and all of these elements. The moment you are into operational delivery of KPIs and dashboards, you need a much larger size team. Whereas if you're only focusing on strategic initiatives, then your size reduces dramatically. So the answer in short is it depends. It depends on a few parameters. It depends on the scope of the team that you're building up. It depends on the maturity of the organization that you're going to support. It depends on, most importantly, how much budget you have. And it will also depend on, to some extent, to the location that you are building it out of. In some locations, like let's say Bangalore, which is the hotbed of analytics in India, finding people who can do analytics is easy. Whereas if you're building the team in some other location which does not have the talent, it's a significantly painful and slow process. And you will have to temper your growth trajectory accordingly. Having said that, I'll probably add one more element. In my experience, the pay-as-you-go model, or the other version of it is start with a small size, show success, build up credibility, and then as you get more demand, scale the team up. And that would be the typical model that I would follow, because that allows us to fail, that reduces the risk of failure from a people perspective, and that also allows us to pick up things which are high impact at the start, rather than pick up a flurry of activities where some of the major impact ones might get lost.
Thank you so much. But I think that there's a question that can also be asked that, as you progress, do you normally end up becoming a lean data science team? Or when you're talking about a lean data science team, there are fundamentally different sets of considerations and you're managing the team differently with slightly different set of objectives. Your take on that, Debel?
So when we speak of a lean data science team, there are two I'm assuming you're referring to the lean agile method of working. And when you're speaking of a lean agile method of working, it also moves towards the growing trend of specialization or hyper specialization, even in the world of data science. So when you're speaking of data science today, rather than having a standard data scientist, today the roles have kind of subdivided into a data engineer, a ML engineer, a coder, a UI UX expert, somebody who can help you in ML operations, and so on and so forth. When you're speaking of a lead data science team, obviously you would not require dedicated effort of all these profiles for every project first, and second, 100% effort of each of these profiles in every project. So sharing of these resources across multiple projects then becomes a very feasible option, and hence as we have been exploring in the recent past, using the principles of scaled agile, and hence sharing the work across sharing resources across multiple projects has been pretty useful.
Super. Thanks a lot. I'll just change tracks very quickly. There are some questions that are coming, and pardon me for not turning on my camera because there seems to be some connection network speed related issues. But just moving on to a separate area, which is very, very AI focused, really. A question that is coming in is around, okay, the background, I guess, is that, whenever we talk about AI adoption, we also talk about challenges or barriers to AI adoption. And we start hearing things like organization culture does not support the need for AI. There's a lack of skilled people. There's lack of data. There's no framework for identifying use cases. There are, infrastructure costs that are on the higher side, and there are, compliance, legal risk issues that also need to be sorted out. And it paints a certain picture in our mind where we need to be really, really sure about the need to deploy AI, and probably do so very selectively and with a lot of intent, right? And once you get onto that space, then there's no moving back, or else you will, sort of lose your investment. A couple of questions that have come in here is, somebody's asking us, does AI development and implementation require large teams?
I will say that it doesn't require a large team, but it will definitely require a moderate size team. And it alludes to one of the elements which you asked in your question, which is key to the success of AI, which is implementation. Implementation would require somebody to take the proof of concept that has been created and then embed and implement it into the systems of the organization, and for which you would require somebody who would follow up, track, and ensure that first it gets implemented, then it's adapted, utilized, and over a period of time tweaked. Right. In general, my belief is that AI is a complicated subject, and its boundaries and some ethical considerations in AI is yet to be defined or fully defined. Net, it is an important element of the world that we are going towards. The business has to see value both from the proof of concept and each stage of implementation, because that's when we will continue receiving sponsorship on it. It has to be in a form and format where the business not only sees the benefit, but is able to use it, sees the difference from the earlier ways of working. And as I said, there has to be a set of team members who has to hammer away at the implementation. It cannot just remain as a proof of concept, in which case it will be termed as a failure.
Sure. So it also very nicely leads to the question around, return on AI, return on investment for AI. The question that is being asked here is, how do we justify the value or the return on investment on AI to convince customers to adopt this as a part of the data science journey? It's a complicated process. It's a long-run process. It's a more expensive process. Artificial intelligence solutions in general. The question is, how do we try and paint a certain kind of picture in the mind so as to be able to convince stakeholders to adopt artificial intelligence? Your views, Debel.
So yes, there are challenges, but I think we have two friends on our side in the world of AI, and that friend is the fact that today everybody, every product almost is speaking of having AI and ML in some form and format, right? So people are a lot more aware. People see it as something that needs to be there, because that brings to the second part, because if you don't do it, your competition will, right? So for anything that we do for any kind of a business, the business value is the key component, and that's my strong belief. Unless anything that you are doing creates business value, it will not be sustainable. And value is not just from a perspective of the revenue increment or margin increment or cost reduction, but it could also be from an experience perspective. So intangibles like experience, intangibles like retention of people, and so on and so forth. But the fact still remains that it is now growing like a wildfire. Companies, large and small, everybody is speaking of using AI. A lot of the toolkits that we have are coming embedded with AI. And hence, I think today it's a lot easier to convince management, convince the powers that be, as well as customers, of the fact that AI is needed. It is, I wouldn't say it necessarily always provides competitive edge. That is indeed the statement of intent, but it is a necessity from a perspective that it can make you, without using it, it can make you not remain competitive in the marketplace. So it is complicated.
Yeah. And then you spoke about conversations. Sorry, please carry on.
No, I was saying it is complicated, it is difficult, it takes money, it takes time, but it's unavoidable.
Right. And you spoke about conversations with stakeholders and then how AI is needed. It may not necessarily always create a competitive advantage, but if you don't do it, you probably end up giving away competitive advantage in some ways. And a good way to have that conversation probably is to talk about the metrics and KPIs that can be used to measure the value generated. So how do you come up with those post implementation KPIs is a question that has come into us.
A big learning. Once something gets implemented, I think stakeholders will shy away from signing it off unless it's pre-agreed. So in bold letters, get the measures of success signed off before starting the implementation. Now, what are the measures of success? Ultimately, everything has to boil down to the profitability of the company. Whether it's in terms of experience, whether it's in terms of revenue, profits, or cost reduction. I'm sorry, that was a thunder. It's a storm going on in Malaysia here. Coming back to the point, I'm sorry, I lost the track of this. Snehanshu, can you just
Apologies, looks like there's a problem with the internet connection at Debel's end also. So I would request everyone.
I don't know if the thunderstorm caused it. It was
yes,
all okay as well.
So, but it's the attendees, thank you for your patience. We are waiting for Debel to reconnect. Thanks.
And in the meanwhile, can I request everybody to put in their comments, thoughts, questions, if any. We'll try and very quickly open it up for questions from you as well. So feel free to type your questions in the chat section.
and have it signed before the project is initiated. Once the project is initiated, I think it is also important to keep track of the fact that as we progress through the project or the use case or the initiative, as to how do we ensure that whatever we have promised is what we are delivering. There could be variations, obviously. As we progress, we learn new things, we identify new things. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. But having said that, I think getting that initial agreement with your stakeholders and reminding them each time till the time you close off and sign off and hand over the product to your end stakeholder is a very extremely important step.
Thank you so much. We lost you for a few seconds, but in the end, I think what I'm also getting from your answer, Debel, is that this is a conversation that needs to happen very early, probably in the initial, business discussion stage itself, in the discovery stage itself, so that the expectations are very clearly set, and then those then become the guidelines for the delivery teams to act upon.
Yeah.
Yeah. No conversation these days, Deval, is quite over without some sort of a reality check in terms of what lies ahead of us in a post-COVID world. A question that is really common is, what is the role of data science in sustaining business in post-COVID world, especially in the emerging markets? Any views on this? What are you seeing from your interactions with businesses around?
I lost the first half of your question, Snehanshu. If you could repeat it.
Sure. So I'm saying that the question is, what is the role of data science, right, in sustaining business in post-COVID world? Was that clear?
Yeah. COVID, and I think it's a cliched statement by now, even though COVID has been around for less than a year, that life, business, the world at large has changed irrecoverably because of COVID. What was the norm in the past isn't the norm today. And hence, I think that's where data science probably will play a significant role in terms of creating those accelerated insights. What hasn't changed is the deluge of data points that gets created day in, day out. And using those data points to create insights which the business can react on very quickly is the key. The second element that I think a little sensitive one is the fact that in the post-COVID world, at least in the immediate future, most businesses will face downturn, is facing downturn. And hence there is a need to do more with less. This is not typically only an efficiency play, but it is also to the fact that businesses may not have enough money to invest, spend on a lot of things that it wants to do. And hence prioritization becomes extremely important. Like every other team, it is also important for the data science team to adapt and prioritize the different things that comes with it. We as data science practitioners tend to be the typical geek, and the typical geek loves the work that he or she does. Now, whether that work is bringing the maximum value to the business, that's the big question that we need to ask ourselves. And if it's not, then it's probably not the right time to take it up, especially in the next few months. We should take up things which can deliver value, even if it's doing something mundane, even if it's doing something which may not feel like cutting edge or the next innovative thing that we want to take up.
So, very interested in knowing, Debel, from you. Do you reckon that the kind of business cases or the business use cases for AI and data science will change post-COVID? Will they focus largely on creating efficiencies? Would they be focusing largely on creating, different types of outcomes, better user experiences, and then things like that? or you think it's just too small a window for us to look out and have a definitive view on?
I'll probably reflect back to the first question that you asked today, which is about citizen data scientist. And it was a phenomenon which came into being before COVID, and I think COVID has just accelerated the process. And hence, in the post-COVID world, I think because of lack of resources, unless some things are really critical or some things create that big bang for the buck, there will be a general push for each user to figure out using the toolkit that is made available to them. And I think that is going to be the direction, in my view, in the immediate future for operation analytics. For strategic analytics, I think that's where the central data science team will come into the picture, will have to play a large role. And in that space, prioritizing what gives the biggest bang for the buck will be an important element.
Lovely. Thank you.
Debel, I
Debal, for that.
lost the last part of what you said. The audio was probably not very clear. Can you please repeat the last part of what you said? The last sentence.
The last sentence was about the fact that it's a repeat of what I said earlier, that there needs to be a key focus on finding out what gives the best bang for the buck in the immediate term, so that we can try and get the businesses the new direction it requires, and at times even back on its feet, right? By focusing on things which are low-hanging. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, there's a little bit of a lag, I believe. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. So I was suggesting that at the beginning of this discussion, I said that I will be asking about 10 questions. We have certainly gone over 10 questions, partly because the conversation created a lot of different segues and wanted to sort of focus on your answers, also questions coming out of your answers as well. Formally, there's a last question that I'll put up to you. And this question is around understanding maybe 2 or 3 key broad trends that will probably shape the data science and AI space and in times to come. Essentially, disruptive trends. If you can list out 2 or 3 of them, it would be really nice.
Okay. So one thing which I definitely see coming, and I guess all of us will be exposed to it in some form and format, is the movement of not just democratizing data science, but also automating data science. And what I mean by that is today, a host of capabilities are coming around AutoML in helping you figure out which is the right model to be used, helping you to deploy models at scale, and so on and so forth. And I think we will see the acceleration of the movement towards creating these bots or these applications, which will make a lot of the operational element, which includes data preparation and mundane task, redundant from our purview. That also means that the specialization in data science will increase significantly. And I think as practitioners of data science, we need to pick up a few areas within the in the data science domain and start growing our capabilities, our skill set, our knowledge, so that all of us can be called an SME in one area or the other. The third thing which is also happening, and I believe will also speeden up, is the sharing of data. A lot of data that earlier was supposed to be confidential, was supposed to be inaccessible, is suddenly becoming a lot more accessible. With COVID, as the new trend seems to be a lot of us are working from home, maintaining social distance, and so on and so forth, making information available in a more public but secure fashion would be another key trend that I see coming in the future. And finally, something we have been speaking throughout the conversation, citizen data scientists, everybody will want the slice of pie. So there will be pressure from the top to automate, there will be pressure from the bottom of people who would want to gain the skills of doing your elementary or moderate level data science on their own.
Thank you so much. Very insightful, right? And not all of these are really developments, disruptive developments in the technology side. It is a lot to do with how businesses are looking to actualize the potential of AI and managing expectations and some of the foundational elements around data. Debel, I think those were the questions that we had received earlier, but it's only fair to also give the audience to ask a few to you. And there are a couple that we have received that would like to put up for your perspective. I think one of the things that is coming to us is around, and this is a question from the live audience right now, how do COE teams engage with verticals for delivery in a service organization? Which is to say, how do you approach, topics around revenue sharing, driving accountability, knowledge sharing on projects delivered, etc. Right? So this is a larger question on engagement models. How do you reflect on this?
There are two ways of doing it. One is the process way. What I mean by process way is there are clearly defined ways of working, an operating model set up, handshakes defined, agreed upon, and you follow it to the T. It takes time to set it up. It makes it a little inflexible at times, and it also probably requires an initial investment. The good part of it is that it is a lot more sustainable. It allows the larger audience to access the artifacts created, the knowledge created through some centralized toolkit or processes. The other option is obviously the unstructured way, which is relationship based. Now, the relationship based model typically would end up being different for different strokes for different folks, which means a set of folks who are extremely well engaged, who have great relationships, will get all the things needed, will get things done, will get sign-offs, will get budgets, will get work, and the set of folks who do not will struggle in that. The good part of this, the pros of the relationship-based model, is the fact that where there are good relationships, you really become an extended arm of the organization. The organization trusts you blindly at times, even more than their own people. But on the flip side, obviously, it is not standardized. It is something which may vary dramatically between two parts of the same organization. If you ask my preference, I would, in the long term, want to go the process way because, as I said, that's more sustainable. But in the beginning, I think to create the few successes, it would have to be a relationship-based start.
Okay. One final question, and then I think we'll pretty much be done. This question is around what do you think about maintenance of a machine learning model in production after implementation? Which is to do with retraining, data update, model. What do you think about maintenance of a machine learning model that has been put in production?
I was going to give a simple answer to it, which is it has to be done. but I think you then complicated the question by asking a few more things. But jokes apart, I think that's where I spoke about the fact that you need a few specialized team members, especially when you're doing AI/ML kind of a model, right? There is a need for a set of folks who always keeps a watch on these models, keeps a watch to see whether the models are serving the purpose or not, and if they are not, it needs to be tweaked and obviously retrained. A better way of going about it is to factor in some of these costs, because end of the day, it generally boils down to the budgets that are given to maintenance. But if we have to preempt it, it should be factored in as a running cost of the organized of a certain solution right up front, so that the stakeholders are not surprised at the end. With a clear call out that if it isn't maintained, here could be the possible fallouts or the repercussions of it. In my world, I think communications, expectation settings, that is the key to some of these things. Delivery of some of these things is a little more easier once you have the right resources on tap.
Thank you, Debel. So I think that pretty much concludes the questions that we had, and I believe I ended up asking 12 to 15 questions to you. And if I were to really push you to pick up one question that you really liked, and in the context of the topic that we had put out, which one would you vote?
I would say that the citizen data scientist is something which I thought was really cool, given the fact that it is one of the things which is catching the wind across a lot of organizations nowadays.
Okay, so just a shout out, that question came in from Mr. Vijay Basu, who is a senior director with Cognizant. So Vijay, if you are tuned in, thanks a lot for sending over that question to us. We really had a nice engaging session on the area that you had identified for this webinar. Lovely. Well, that I think was the masterclass session for this time. Thanks, Debel, so much. I think there were plenty of takeaways, and then I understand it's a busy Thursday afternoon for you. You kindly agreed to spend some time with us on this forum. We cannot thank you enough. To the audience, again, a small message that we'll continue to carefully curate the speaker and topic combination to bring you the very best from the data science community, and today's session was an example of that. And also that our commitment to you will be that this masterclass series will always be free, so feel free to spread the word around and continue to show the same kind of engagement in forthcoming sessions. So thanks a lot, and for this time it's me, Snehanshu, signing off the session. Thanks everybody for joining in.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.